Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Deadpool and Wolverine, the latest Marvel movie to release in theaters. I have two great friends with me. First, I'd like to introduce Jacob Walsh.
Yeah, buddy, let's go.
Jacob, if I was holding a baseball card with some Marvel or superhero fun facts about you, what would be on that card?
The reason why I knew that there was a post-credit scene in the first Iron Man movie was because right before I saw it, I went to Hot Topic to buy an Iron Man t-shirt, and the lady at the cash register said, "Hey, stick around after the credits." And I did, but I thought the whole time that she was just pranking me, like, "Hey, remember I made that idiot watch the whole credits of Iron Man for no reason?" But she ended up, doing me a huge favor. So whoever you are, thank you.
Amazing. And Jacob, out of the three of us that are here today, will definitely be the comic book expert. Jacob's read many comic books, so he brings that perspective.
Yeah, no, I'm currently subscribed to the Marvel app, the comic book app on my phone, and I gotta tell you, when it doesn't crash, it's really a great app. As Paul Rudd says in Anchorman, 60% of the time it works every time. So worth checking out, I guess.
And our other guest today is Javier Fuentes. Javier, what is your history with Marvel superheroes, the MCU?
I've seen every single Marvel movie pre-Endgame other than Thor the Dark World and Avengers Age of Ultron and Captain America Civil War. Actually, I've seen the ending of Captain America Civil War. I've never seen the beginning of it. My favorite MCU movie is Shang-Chi. And it's so weird because it's not even close to me. I just love kung fu movies. I saw Shang-Chi, no joke, like 5 times in the theater. And I could go see it a sixth time. The CGI dragon fight at the end is epic, and whoever disagrees is incorrect.
And if you had to share one fun fact or one short story about your experience with superheroes, do you have anything to share?
So I am not a comic book guy, but my history with the MCU is I remember seeing Iron Man 1 in theaters and thinking it was pretty all right, but the one that I remember the most is seeing Captain America in theaters. I don't have that much of a memory of seeing Iron Man, but I know I did. Like I have like a faint image of Tony Stark on the movie screen. But Captain America is the one I remember seeing because I actually saw it in Canada. Fun fact with some of my cousins. And I'm glad they didn't take me to a French showing because I would be lost. But as far as I'm concerned, Captain America was my first.
Fantastic. And of course, I'm Brendan. I am the Shield Hero, and this is our critique. So, thinking this chat can be a little more informal, I personally like listening to podcasts in the background, whether I'm cleaning or doing whatever. I guess to kick it off, is there anything you guys want to say about the movie overall?
What would you guys rate the movie now that we've had some time to sit with it out of 10?
8.5.
I'll give it a 6.
Uh, Last time I spoke to Brendan, he was lower on it. I I'm torn between an 8 and a 9. I'm gonna say 8 out of 10.
Last time we talked, I said 7, right?
Yeah,
I was right in the middle of you two.
yeah. So you got higher as you've had time to sit with it?
Yeah.
Dang.
I think what do I think? I think it's nice to have a fun movie. Usually I'm pretty concerned with the plot and having everything make sense. And I think that's why I originally gave it a 7, but sitting with it a bit and thinking back on what I was gonna say, I'm gonna bump it up to like an 8.5. I don't think it's Marvel's best movie, but I think it's a really solid movie. Maybe not the strongest villain motivations, but on a meta level, which is something that I was really reflecting over, I think on a meta level, it's pretty strong.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that it's I feel like when people hear 6 out of 10, they think like, "Oh my god, that's so bad, like, you hate it." Like, to be clear, I don't, dislike this movie or anything like that. I think it's fine. I think it's like a perfectly like decent, pretty enjoyable movie. I've actually gone lower on it since I watched it. I feel like at the time I probably would have gone like 7 or 7.5. I just think that it has some serious flaws. I think it's the worst of the Deadpool trilogy. And I think that it's got some big story issues, certain things I don't like about it, but I still, would say I'm more positive on it than negative, right? Like to me, a 6 out of 10 is like, it was more good than bad. It's not like I'm not going off the American school system here, where a 64% is like you may as well just throw your test out. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not going to be the guy who hates it. I just think I'm not as positive on it as the two of you.
It's just a fun movie, isn't it? It's funny that you say that you think it's the worst out of the three. I personally rate all three Deadpool movies the same. I haven't seen the first two in a very long time, but I've come out of the theater watching all three pretty much with the same reaction, that it's just a funny movie and I wasn't really expecting much out of it in the story department. If it makes me laugh and I like the shtick, then I'm gonna really like the movie. Now, I'm not so as high as like a lot of the public is, because I feel like there was a lot of recency bias when it came out, when people were like, "Oh my god, this movie's a 9, 10 out of 10." It's not. It's just a fun movie with great cameos, and Ryan Reynolds does the shtick near perfectly, just like he usually does.
In looking through Reddit, just seeing different people's reactions over the movie, I saw one person say, if you're going into a Deadpool movie for the plot, you're going to be disappointed because the main point is to make you laugh. And I think that's pretty much what you were saying, Javier.
Did you think it was funny at the very least, Jacob?
Yeah, I enjoyed most of the jokes. I mean, there were a few things that I thought were a little like, but in general, like I actually enjoyed the comedy way more than I thought I would. I think the first two movies are hysterical, but honestly, like I didn't really enjoy the comedy that was in the trailers for this movie, which made me a little bit worried. But then I think like actually the movie itself surprised me with how much I laughed. So I did enjoy that aspect of it, yes. Yeah, I think it was funny. I don't know. I think it may be a little bit of a cop out, I guess, in some sense to say that like, you shouldn't be there for the story because I actually think that's one of the reasons why the first Deadpool movie is so good, which I think I might say is still the best Deadpool movie. I really do like the first two a lot. But honestly, I think like the first movie, I rewatched it before this came out, and like it does a really good job of establishing his relationship with Vanessa and like making you care about them and kind of get, invested in their relationship. And it's ultimately kind of like a revenge story because like he's going after Ajax because how he's been horribly disfigured and he thinks Ajax can fix him. So to an extent, I would push back on the Redditors a little bit. I would be downvoted if I must, and say that I think that while the comedy is obviously like a very core aspect of it, the plot is important too.
I agree. That's fair. I also think Deadpool 1 had the strongest plot. I think on the comedy aspect with Deadpool and Wolverine, I was happy that there weren't a lot of stale comedy moments, like jokes that went on for too long. I think in some of Marvel's more recent movies, some of the jokes just sit for too long. And I think there may be one or two in this movie, but overall, I thought a lot of the jokes landed. Most of them landed. All right, so let's talk about character arcs. What did you think of Deadpool's arc? Deadpool or Wolverine's arc? Both of them had big arcs.
I thought Wolverine's arc was more drastic and more clear than Deadpool's arc, because it's been a minute since I've seen the movie, maybe like 2 weeks at this point. Maybe you guys can refresh my memory on it. I don't fully remember Deadpool having that much of a arc from beginning to end. I just remember him being Deadpool, 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 pretty much.
Well, maybe not so much of an arc as in he needed to change, but there was a moral question raised, and that had to be answered by the end of the film. And the question was the idea of choosing between your family that's in your home or leaving them behind and rising up to something greater.
Hmm.
He had to grapple with that. And in the end, he got both. But, he was fighting for his family for most of the movie, and he got lucky being able to have them, but also join the MCU.
I didn't really get Deadpool's arc in this movie too much. I honestly had a couple like story related issues that sort of play into this. So like off the bat, I didn't understand why not being in the Avengers made him so depressed that it contributed to like breaking up with his girlfriend and like becoming a used car salesman and like essentially quitting being Deadpool because like part of his arc in the second movie is about him realizing that he doesn't really fit into a traditional superhero team, and that's okay. Because, like, he says in that movie, like, sometimes doing the right thing is messy, it's screwed up, but Deadpool is the guy that can do it. Not a squeaky clean hero like Colossus who never gets his hands dirty. Like, Deadpool can do, like, the darker, screwed up things for the right reasons. And so it felt weird then that, like, he all of a sudden wanted to be on the Avengers so bad that the rejection from that team sent him into a years long depression. I didn't feel like that really made sense from the second movie.
I should have watched the second movie before this. I haven't seen it in a while.
Now, what makes sense is that part of the movie is a little bit of a blur for me because I had to pee so bad that I went during his meeting with Happy. I went to the bathroom during that time, and then I came back, and I think he was at the party with everybody.
Well, listen, Javier, you're only allowed to be in 95% of this recording because you only saw 95% of the movie.
I would also say, like, the other thing kind of tying into that, just to get this out of the way, that didn't make sense to me was sort of like, why was he broken up with Vanessa ultimately? Because, like, she's not in the movie that much. And ultimately, like, he obviously wants to save her and his other friends anyway. So, just like on a story level, I didn't understand what the point was of making them be broken up, like, only to potentially get back together at the end. Especially because, like, midway through, there's that flashback, like the conversation that they have when they go to break up, but then it turns out that like at least part of it isn't what happened because Cassandra Nova was like messing with his memories. Like I just didn't get how the movie would really be all that different. Because again, I also just didn't understand why Deadpool was so depressed and quit being Deadpool. Like I just didn't think there was a good enough reason.
I think it makes more sense to have them broken up than to have them together. At least, in the context of the movie, because if Deadpool was considering leaving her when they were still in a relationship, you know, he's a jerk. The fact that the fact that they're broken up and, she might still not like him, there's a chance that she doesn't want to be with him. I think it'd be easier for Deadpool to walk away from that versus someone he's in a relationship with.
He doesn't walk away from it, right? Because like immediately he's like, "No, you can't kill my timeline. Like I need to save like the nine people in this photo need to be saved." So like them being broken up doesn't really affect his motivation, right? Like he still wants to save his timeline. So how it, you know what I mean? Like it was just like a thing of like I didn't, and I also didn't understand why the movie like showed us the scene of them breaking up and then like didn't finish it. I was just kind of like, you brought us all the way there. Like, why did they break up? I was curious about that.
I think this movie suffers. I don't know if suffers is the right word. I think the movie may have done a better job of explaining everything if it was still just a Sony property rather than being introduced into the MCU. So I think being introduced to the MCU kind of gave it that MCU. I don't know if the right word is curse, where like all the movies in this phase have just kind of been plagued by issues. If this movie would have just done better if it stayed a Sony property.
It had a lot of shoes to fill in terms of exposition because I think part of the focus with each movie is to make sure that you don't have to do homework to understand it. So there was a lot of like exposition that needed to be set up, which is part of the reason why Paradox was introduced. Like he handled a lot of the exposition, especially at the beginning. I think they did a good job. Basically, they were like, Here's this bucket list of things that you got to explain to the general audience if you want to use them." And I think the movie did a good job at making everything clear. Like, if you didn't know what the void was going in, you had a good understanding. Or even like the multiverse timelines.
I think then, as far as your other question about Wolverine's arc, I mean, I thought he had a bit of a better arc, I guess, because he sort of like finds his purpose again. It was fitting of that version of Wolverine. I like that he was one who was like more depressed, down in the dumps. Obviously they reveal that he wears the costume. Like his teammates always wanted him to wear the costume, and he didn't. So now he's kind of like wearing it in their honor, or their memory, if I'm remembering that correctly. So I thought that was fine. I mean, I have other thoughts on Wolverine that may be more controversial, but I would say in terms of his character arc, it was solid.
Spill the controversy.
Okay, all right. So shifting gears a bit, one of I guess the reasons why I would rate this movie lower than I think most people are, because I do agree with I think it was you, Javier, who said it, that like there's a lot of just love and hype for this film. I don't know if this movie what like fully convinced me that it was worth kind of like undoing the end of Logan. Now, to be clear, I don't mean like literally undoing Logan in the sense that like they obviously keep that version of Wolverine dead. I think Hugh Jackman was great in this movie. Obviously, I love seeing the yellow costume. That's not the issue. My thing is that I just feel like Logan was such a great send off for the character. And I do feel like on an emotional level, like seeing him back does undo the ending of that movie a little bit for me. And I think that like the whole kind of variant concept of bringing an actor back as the same character, but it's a different version of the character, just doesn't work for me. It's a little bit like trying to have your cake and eat it too. Of like getting the audience excited because they're really attached to this actor playing this character, but also like you can't criticize them undoing the end of Logan because it's a new version of the character. So it's like a whole new thing. Like I just don't go for that, to be honest.
Let's see. I am going to say something that might be a hot take, and just remember, I'm not like Jacob, where I've read comic books. I've never read a single comic book. I just like superheroes, and I grew up watching Spider-Man movies, and then I eventually started watching, the MCU, which is what got me into superheroes. I hate the idea of multiverses. I just think they're excuses to bring characters back. Like you were saying, like I do kind of agree with you when you said that it's pretty much undoing the end of Logan. I'm glad we have the movie. I'm glad we got to see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine again because, like I said, I enjoyed the movie. But that whole explanation of like, oh, he's just a different Wolverine from this timeline, I just think all that stuff's just kind of dumb.
I like the idea of multiverse, but I think it's very hard to execute in a way that's satisfying. Like you guys said, it's playing on actors that we love, playing characters that we love. And especially when it comes to characters that dies, it always cheapens the death. I don't think that Wolverine's death in Logan, I think that still stands for me. I don't feel like this movie undid anything, in my opinion. But I think that this Wolverine that we saw in Deadpool and Wolverine, I think we should be done with him. I think it's going to be his arc came to a completion with this movie. He needed redemption. He got it at this movie. So I'm not sure how many interesting ways there are to go with this Wolverine after this movie. But I have a feeling that he's going to come back.
Now, see, there doesn't have to be a lot of interesting ways because Marvel just likes money, and Hugh Jackman makes money.
He also costs a lot of money, though.
He does.
Did you guys all see No Way Home?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because like I guess the thing about No Way Home, I loved seeing Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield back in those roles, as I think a lot of people did, right? But part of why it works so well is because they're playing the same versions of the characters that like we grew up with.
100%.
People remember like when he saves Zendaya, right, from falling off of the building, and he gets emotional. Like it hits you right because you remember from his previous movie when a similar situation happened with Gwen Stacy and she died, right? And so it's the same thing of like when they brought back Michael Keaton as Batman, and it's like there's different references in the Flash to his time as Batman that work because like you like those movies and you recognize him as that character. I feel like I don't like what they did with Wolverine in this movie in the sense of those variants, because it's like I have no emotional attachment to this version of the character because it's a new character, but also I do have an emotional attachment because it's the same actor playing the character. And so, like, to me, this really becomes an issue, for example, when one of the characters who comes back in this movie is X-23, Laura from Logan, and they try to give you like little like Logan reunion and like hit you in the feels when she puts on the pink sunglasses from that movie. But it's like, yeah, like it's a Logan reunion, but also it's not, because this Wolverine doesn't know her, doesn't care about her. They don't have that history. And like she looked up to Wolverine as a little kid, but this is a different Wolverine. Like it's not, so it's not like a true Logan reunion in that sense. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it's like this weird game you have to play of like, I love this character, but it's not the character I know, kind of and I just wish if like these actors came back as these characters, it was the same version. You know what I mean?
I think it depends on what you're looking to get out of the movie, because I totally see what you're saying, but that didn't bother me. I wasn't looking forward to an X-23 Wolverine reunion. I wasn't even expecting it. I don't know how, but I missed seeing her in trailers. I think she was in one of the trailers. So it was a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting anything from that. And I think that's part of the reason why a lot of the other cameos worked. I largely wasn't expecting them. The only one that I called was Johnny Storm. So like that reveal, that
That was insane.
that reveal didn't that mislead didn't throw me because I was expecting it to be Johnny, but yeah.
I completely forgot that Chris Evans played the Human Torch in the original Fantastic Four, which, as you guys remember, is one of the best superhero movies of all time.
Well, it is a movie.
It is a movie of all time.
Nostalgic.
I'd probably still get a kick out of it if I watched it today.
Yeah.
But when he popped up on the screen, I was like, wait a minute. Captain America's in this movie? This is pretty sick. And then he said, fly, fly. And bro, I lost it. I was so hyped when that happened. I was like, oh my god. My favorite cameo, even though it wasn't like that like big of a character in the movie, I loved seeing Blade. When Blade popped up, I was like, yo, this movie just shot up to an 8 out of 10. And I'm gonna be honest, I've never seen the original Blade, but Wesley Snipes looks cool as man.
Yeah. I think the cameos really helped. To Jacob's point, these were versions of the characters that they were originally playing. It's not new variants of them, or at least it was heavily implied. I'm not sure if they ever officially confirmed it, but heavily implied that these were the characters from the original 2000s movies, aside from Gambit. But I liked that meta angle that they had with Channing Tatum as Gambit. For anyone who's unaware, Channing Tatum was attached to a Gambit movie back in 2014. It almost got started, but it was killed by the Disney Fox merger. And I have a quote that he said recently. He said, "We actually intended Gambit to be somewhat unintelligible. That was sort of the joke. Ryan would come up to me and say, 'I don't want to know anything that you're saying on this take.' So I just dialed it all the way up. And then on other takes, Ryan's like, 'All right, I've got to understand what you're saying now.'" I thought that was interesting, and I'm glad that it was intentional that they played up his unintelligible accent, because I actually couldn't understand him in a lot of the takes.
Ooh, you know how long I've been waiting for this? I'm about to make a name for myself out here.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who grew up on and has a real fondness for those 2000s Marvels movies, I mean, a lot of them are terrible. Like, honestly, I think the Fantastic Fours with Chris Evans are actually decent compared to like the Elektra movie or even the third Blade. But yeah, it was awesome seeing Wesley Snipes back as Blade. That was really cool. That was definitely my favorite cameo. Either that or Chris Evans as Human Torch. I was a little disappointed that like the second he flames on, Pyro just like sucks the fire out of him. I was like, ah, but it was still cool seeing him back. I said this to you guys before, but like, truly though, I just think that bringing Jennifer Garner back as Elektra was like the worst cameo they could have possibly chosen. The Daredevil movie that she's from is bad. Her actual Elektra movie is like atrocious. Like it is terrible. And like literally out of all the people they could have brought back, like in a recent interview, they even said that like they didn't ask Tom Jane to come back as the Punisher, and I was like, why not? Like, why would you not ask him? Like, I don't even think his Punisher movie's good. Like, it's pretty bad too, but like I would have at least gotten a mild pop out of that. Like, same thing, like Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider. Like, where was he? Or where was just the Ben Affleck Daredevil? Like, it was a weird mishmash for me of like cameos I was excited for and cameos I was just like, why? Like, why did you bring this person back? It was the same thing as The Flash last year. This movie kind of reminded me of The Flash a little bit because I was like, oh, cool. They've brought back like Michael Keaton is Batman, but then also George Clooney is Batman, from Batman and Robin, like the worst movie ever made. And it's like, why, I'm mixed on the cameos. Some of them were cool though.
I think bringing back some of those obscure characters, like Jennifer Garner's Elektra, for example, played into the meta story that was happening. So I saw this theory that the movie was originally written with the meta plot in mind, and then they shaped the story around it. So the TVA, or specifically Mr. Paradox, was a stand-in for Disney, who was ready to destroy the Fox universe because the fan favorite Wolverine was gone, and Wolverine was designated as the anchor being. And Disney was tired of waiting for the universe to just die naturally, so they tried plucking Deadpool out to bring him to the MCU. But Deadpool, aka Ryan Reynolds, used this opportunity to say goodbye to the voided Fox franchises. So I think it makes sense that some of these characters that, we might have forgotten about, but I'm sure Jennifer Garner's Elektra is someone's favorite Elektra. So I think it's cool that they brought these characters from this like partly dead universe to give to give them redemption, like Wolverine got in this movie.
I have a better idea than all three of those cameos. What they should have done is just have three different variants of Howard the Duck. I'm sure they exist.
And have one of them just
Um,
Seth Green. Yeah, so I wasn't expecting much from the cameos, I think I said. So I was surprised and pleasantly surprised to see all these cameos back. And I know, Jacob, you had some thoughts about Channing Tatum specifically, him coming back on like a meta nod front.
Yeah, this is just another thing that I'm sure this is just me. So I liked Channing Tatum as Gambit. Like I thought that he looked great. He was funny. Like the costume looked perfect. Like that was all great. Just like on a personal level, I'm not a fan of them bringing back actors as characters that they never actually played. It feels very inside baseball for me where like 99% of the audience doesn't get the joke and is probably more confused than anything. Like I get it, but that's because, I follow superhero movie news and I, always have. And it just feels like the joke is like too catered to people who follow behind the scenes stuff because it's like, here's a bunch of actors playing characters that you remember from your childhood. And then also like somebody else who was never there. Like I had the same issue again, throwing it back to the Flash, where they bring back Michael Keaton and George Clooney and they, revive a bunch of people from the dead with CGI. But then they're also like, oh, hey, look, it's the Nicolas Cage Superman, from the 90s Tim Burton movie that never actually got made. And look, he's fighting the giant spider, like in that one Kevin Smith story that he always tells. Like, it feels like, okay, but like the audience for this is so small. It's just like, I don't know. To me, I don't care for it. Like, my barometer for this is that I've seen these movies with Tyler, my fiance, who's like not involved in superheroes or anything like that. And like I remember when we saw The Flash, she was like, "When has Nicolas Cage played Superman?" And I was like, "Well, funny story, he didn't." And she was like, "Oh, cool." And like it was the same thing with this movie. She was like, "Okay, that's Blade. That's like, who's that?" And I'm like, "Well, you see, Channing Tatum had a dream. You know what I mean? That he wanted to be Gambit, and it didn't happen. But now he's here, and it's like, oh, okay,
Jacob whips
sure."
out the whiteboard. So you see,
I love that though. I think it's okay if the audience doesn't get it. They place Easter eggs like that throughout all the Marvel productions that only the super fans will spot. I see it as this is what could have been. And I love seeing a glimpse of that what could have been.
now see, I am from the camp that actually didn't know that Gambit wanted to play that. I'm not Gambit. That Channing Tatum wanted to play Gambit. So I'm coming from it from that perspective, and I liked it. My reaction went as follows: "Oh my god, that's Blade!" I don't know who that is when Elektra popped up on the screen. And Gambit, is that Channing Tatum? And like I was just like, okay, he's Gambit, and for some reason we can't understand him, which now I realize is on purpose. But he was also one of the funnier parts of the movie for me. I loved when he said something that was completely unintelligible, and then Deadpool just goes, "Who's your dialogue coach? The Minions?"
Best joke of the movie, in my opinion. But, you know, you didn't know who Elektra was at first, but that's okay because people didn't know who Channing Tatum was, or Gambit was at first. And there are fans that loved seeing Elektra back. So, that cameo is for the fans, and you didn't need to watch her movie for her to have like an important plot in this movie. Like think she still did her role well, and they did the roles well, the cameos.
Shout out to the Elektra fans. Your opinions matter.
That's right. We hear you here at
I
the Shield Hero Critique.
I behoove you to find a single person out there who just likes the Elektra movie. It doesn't have to be in their top 25 movies or anything like that. Find me one person who thinks that the 2005 Elektra movie is good. I dare you. I double dog dare you.
Or the Daredevil movie. The 2003 Daredevil movie. She was in that too. I am calling all Elektra fans, all Jennifer Garner Elektra fans, please comment below your support to prove Jacob wrong.
The people who like the what is it, 2005 Elektra movie? The
Yeah,
people who like
2005.
the people who like that movie are the people who don't eat the crust on their pizza.
Well, now you're slandering, and I will not tolerate that on this channel. Let's talk about some of the fight scenes. So there were 3 fight scenes that stuck out to me. I can't recall any others. There was the fight in the void with Deadpool and Wolverine, and also Wolverine and Sabretooth. There was the car fight with Deadpool and Wolverine. There was the Deadpool variant fight where Deadpool and Wolverine attack all the variants. And then I'm just realizing I forgot the final fight with all of the cameos, Deadpool and Wolverine attacking Cassandra's home base. So what'd you guys think about those
and
fights?
and the intro, that counts.
Yes, yeah, that's fair. The intro bye 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 too.
Which that's my favorite intro. That's my favorite intro in a Deadpool movie.
So tell me your thoughts.
I love NSYNC. I love that song, and I love that they had a dance double play the dancing Deadpool, and his name in the credits is Dancepool. That's peak writing right there.
I enjoyed the action scenes. The moment that really got me was the end of the fight with all the Deadpool variants where Deadpool and Wolverine like jump out of the back of the bus and you get like that almost like comic book-esque pose. Like that was awesome. Like that was one of those moments where I'm just like, this is literally just everything you see on the page come to life. I thought it was good. Like I thought that the car fight was funny too when they're just like fighting in that or like the van, whatever it is that they're driving. I guess if I was to throw a critique out there, it would just be that I do think on balance, I enjoyed the action in Deadpool 2 a little bit more because that movie was directed by David Leitch, who's one of the directors of John Wick. And so it had kind of that like John Wick flair to it. And there's just like really cool moments in that, like at the end where Deadpool and Cable are like shooting all the sex offenders. If you remember that scene, like stuff like that, like, or even the opening scene with 9 to 5 when he's like in the bathhouse, kind of dancing as he's stabbing all the dudes. Like, so I think that movie's action was a little bit better, but I thought this was good too, no doubt. I was very underwhelmed with the quote unquote fight between Wolverine and Sabretooth. I was kind of hoping that they would actually get like a cool rated R fight because they fought on the top of Statue of Liberty in the first X-Men movie. And I was like, oh, neat. They're going to do it like good this time. And then he just cuts off his head. So that was underwhelming.
You thought. So I think the interesting thing about the car fight is that these two guys are two people who seemingly cannot easily be killed. They can take as much punishment as possible, and they are just going to regenerate. So for that reason, that car fight is excellent because they are both seemingly brought to their limit, and they just won't die.
Yeah, my favorite fight was easily the car fight, largely because I just wasn't expecting it. It was unexpected. I really liked that, and then they made use of the small space well. I heard an interview, I believe it was the director, Sean Levy. He said that the fight in the void with Deadpool and Wolverine was wide open space, so he wanted to bring it into a smaller, confined space, and that was part of the reason why they did that car fight. I really enjoyed that.
Did you like when they kept hitting the radio, playing different songs? I was like, yo, dude.
Yeah, I do wanna talk about the music. I think music played a large part in this movie. Before we move on from the fight scenes, though, I appreciated that they gave everyone their own moment in that fight to push for Cassandra's base. If you imagine a real fight with a bunch of people on 2 sides fighting, things happen pretty quickly, but I like they were able to take a moment and just show everyone, and I'm sure the Gambit fans were very happy they got to see some card action as well.
Which that was interesting too, because that honestly one of the only instances I could think of where like a PG-13 character gets to be done rated R. Because like X-Men is usually not a rated R property. Not that I've read all of the Gambit comic books, but I feel like people know him from like the cartoon and stuff like that. Like he's not a super violent character, so it was interesting like seeing him like blow people's faces up with his cards, especially because then like he's with Elektra, who's also from PG-13 movies, but is a little bit more of a rated R character in the comic books. And then you've got Blade, who, his movies were rated R, and he's a very rated R character. Then obviously also X-23's from Logan, which was rated R. So that was just like kind of a weird thing that kind of tickled my brain of like a lot of times like Wolverine got upgraded from PG-13 or rated R, but I think everybody knew that that made sense and that was how the character kind of should have been from the start. But like Gambit is not really a rated R character. So I thought that was interesting.
I think it depends on what universe you're playing in, right? Because like if you look at the boys, for example, they take I don't know if you could say realistic, but a very violent approach as to what could happen if some of these people had some of these crazy powers. Versus if you're talking about the Marvel universe, I don't know, what would you call it?
I know what you're saying. Like in the boys, you see these powers like legitimately kill people. Like if they're not used correctly. You don't generally see those types of consequences in like Marvel movies, or I'm not that familiar with DC, but I don't think you see it that much in DC. But like if you look at the boys, literally in the first episode, I don't remember the speedster's name.
A
Express,
Train.
Raceway, B Train, A Train,
A Train.
A Train. He literally runs full speed, not paying attention, straight through the main character's girlfriend. And she explodes. And that's essentially what would happen if you ran that fast towards someone. You know what I mean?
I think
Um,
that's exactly the word I was looking for, the consequences.
yeah.
The boys make sure there are extreme consequences for the extreme powers versus Marvel or DC, which limits the consequences. And then I guess in some way that sort of limits the powers as well.
Like, do you think Barry Allen actually ran through anybody?
I mean, Jacob's the comic wizard, so he would know if that happened.
He phases through people by vibrating his molecules at super speed. So it's yeah, exactly not quite the same. But yeah, I just meant like, and to be clear, like I think that's totally fine. Like it's not a criticism or anything. It just was kind of like if like tomorrow they came out with like a rated R Ninja Turtles movie and it was like, oh, like Leonardo is like slicing people's heads off, like not something, you would typically associate with that franchise. You know what I
It's
mean?
the Last
I
Ronin.
was just gonna say they're working on that.
Right. Yeah, I still have to read that book.
Not to divert the conversation that much. The Last Ronin is an excellent comic. I bought like the complete book a few months ago and I read through the whole thing. Whew, such an excellent story.
Ooh, he's about to make a name for himself here.
Excited for the inevitable video game that got announced not that long ago, but it's got to be great.
All right, so was it Javier or Jacob that touched on the in sync dance for the opening of Deadpool? Javier.
That was me. I loved that part. I laughed so loud and I started like dancing along with him. And For those of you who aren't in the know, if you look at the song Bye 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 on Apple Music, if you look it up on YouTube, they changed the title so it says Bye 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 from Deadpool and Wolverine. And I think that's hilarious. They're in on the joke.
Yeah, you guys know I'm a huge music guy. When I first heard the song, I didn't love it for the movie. And then when Deadpool started doing the dance, that completely sold it for me. Love it. That was so funny.
I think the only thing that surprised me was that, like, not that they needed to, but they didn't mention that that song is in X-Men 2. There's the scene where Wolverine, Pyro, Iceman, and Rogue, I think it is, escape when Stryker's team attacks the X-Mansion and they get in the car, and Wolverine turns the car on and the radio's like, "Ba, ba, ba," and he, like, turns it off. And yeah, surprised they didn't bring that up.
Yeah, all of the jokes or the musical references to Hugh Jackman singing, that was great.
That Music Man reference that probably only like a handful of people got. Because what I forget to realize is that there's probably a good chunk of people who only know Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and don't know him as this singing, dancing goof who does Broadway shows. Like when they referenced Music Man, I was like, that was for me.
Yeah, great references.
It's also like some really, I don't know if the right word is obscure, but I've never seen Loki. Okay, I still haven't seen the show. But like they reference a character from a very specific episode, and he straight up goes, "That character from Loki season 1, episode 5?"
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I was kind of surprised with this movie that it was way more of a goodbye to the X-Men movies than it was like a proper introduction of Deadpool into the MCU. Because, like, outside of that quick weird thing that I still don't know what that's about, where he's with Thor, Deadpool still hasn't really interacted with any of the MCU characters. That definitely feels like a potential thread down the line of, like, finally meeting Spider-Man and Thor and Hulk and all those people. I was thinking that, like, his big MCU debut would actually be him in the MCU with all those characters, but outside of, like, the TVA, I guess there's, like, a second where he bumps into the Hulk, right, at the beginning, but that was it.
I mean, we did see that look into the future of Thor crying over Deadpool's face. So I'm good with this movie being just a Deadpool movie and then having the rest of his appearances in the MCU being where he interacts with like Thor, Hulk. I would love to see him interact with Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that would be hilarious. Because I think Ryan Reynolds has gone on record saying he doesn't want to make a Deadpool 4, at least not right now. Like, that's not in the cards. So Deadpool's appearances in the MCU are probably going to be in other MCU properties.
He also said that Deadpool and Wolverine wasn't Deadpool 3,
Oh,
right? I'm pretty sure he said that before the movie came out.
I don't know.
I'll have to look at that, but I'm pretty sure that him and Sean Levy were saying that before the movie came out. So, back to the music. Were there any song selections that you didn't like?
I don't remember the music didn't hit you in the face. I don't remember it. Is the way I'll put it. Like I remember the music from the car when they were hitting the radio because those were meant to be specific references. I remember the opening because they literally hit you in the face with NSYNC. But other than that, when it came to atmosphere, I don't really remember the music from the movie.
I mean, I was kind of indifferent towards it because I know one of the other songs was, "Like a Prayer" by Madonna during the bus scene, right? With all the Deadpool variants. I mean, I thought it was fine. I didn't really have strong feelings on it one way or the other, which I mean, I think the NSYNC one was definitely the most memorable. I know the previous Deadpool movies have had moments like that. Like, I remember in the second one specifically, they played Bangarang twice, because there's the part where Deadpool and Cable are fighting, and he's like, "Since you're from the future, I've got a couple questions, like, is dubstep still a thing?" And they play it. Yeah, I don't know, indifferent, I would say.
Was the second one or the first one the one that had "Tomorrow" by Annie?
Second one.
Second one was that what that was like toward the end when they went in like slow motion and it was this like eerie version of the song.
Yeah.
Now what they should have done is change the title of that on Apple Music to "From Deadpool 2."
Yeah, I don't think the first one that I can recall really had moments like that. The only real music moment I can remember is, like, when they do the Deadpool theme when he like first becomes Deadpool and he's trying on the different costumes and they have that rock song where he's like Deadpool, pool, pool. Like that's all I remember.
There was one placement in Deadpool and Wolverine that I didn't like.
Oh,
So if you remember when Deadpool sees Dogpool, the Goo Goo Dolls are playing Iris.
right.
I love the Goo Goo Dolls. That album that Iris is on, Dizzy Up the Girl, is one of my favorite albums of all time. But I don't think that was the placement. They used it twice. They used it with Deadpool and Dogpool, and they also used it at the very end when Paradox was trying to say that they died, and then they come around the corner alive.
Oh, stuff like coming back to me. Another placement I thought was funny when Deadpool was making like those gay jokes toward that guy in the HR department, I guess, in the TVA, and his ass is about to fall on him, and then you hear the song play. I was like, I'm in.
Which actually, that is a music moment from the first movie that they open the first movie with that song because it's the slow motion opening when he's in the car wreck
That's
and
right.
they kind of like zoom in. Yeah, so they actually do play that song. Yeah, I rewatched all of the X-Men movies leading up to Deadpool and Wolverine, like even the ones I knew I'm sure wouldn't be relevant, like New Mutants and Dark Phoenix. I watched all of them. It was a time. That's why when Deadpool says like, welcome to the MCU, you're joining a kind of a low point. I was like, that's funny, but also like, boy, they've never gone as low as Dark Phoenix. So they're still doing okay.
I haven't seen an X-Men movie other than Logan. Well, I guess the Deadpool movies are X-Men movies. I forget about that. But I've seen Deadpool 1 and 2, and I've seen Logan. I want to see Days of Future Past because I hear that one's really good.
It is.
But other than that, I have no knowledge of like any of them.
I think I saw all of the main ones except for Dark Phoenix.
The best one.
Yeah. And I didn't see New Mutants, but Anna Joy Taylor, right? As Magic.
Anya Taylor-Joy,
Anya Taylor-Joy. Joy Taylor Anya.
otherwise known as Princess Peach from the Mario movie.
We are not getting into the Mario movie here. That's a hot take if you want. Oh man.
That's a different podcast.
That's a different channel. Yeah. Magic. I thought she makes a great Magic.
Yeah, but it's just the classic thing. I mean, I don't know if this isn't really a spoiler, where she like goes to fight the demon bear, and one of the other characters is like, Ilyana, don't fight it, it's magic. And she like does the dramatic turnaround and she's like, so am I. And then like jumps through her portal to fight the demon bear. So I was like, come on. I always am kind of like I don't hate it, but I also don't like it. I'm like when they like don't want to say the villain's name or like a character's name, so they always just like say it casually. Like I always think of the Incredible Hulk, bringing it back to the MCU. Emil Blonsky wants to take the drugs, and the other dude's like, a mix of your blood and the Hulk's blood would be an abomination. And it's like, okay, but like just call him the Abomination. The other guy's the Hulk. It's okay.
Yeah, it's I forget what it's called. It's like a screenwriting rule, or maybe not a rule, but it's what's something that's less than a rule?
Less than a rule, like more lenient
It's
guideline.
a guideline. There's a guideline when you're writing. If you're writing up to the point where you're saving this like monumental thing, but the audience is already in on what the monumental thing is going to be, it leads to a buildup that's not satisfying. So there's a balance that you need to have where you can hold the cards a little bit, but also you shouldn't be holding out for all of the best moments. At some point you need to have these great moments up front. I'm especially thinking of TV writing. Like if you have one great moment at the end of 22 episodes and all or most of the episodes are building up to that last point, you're going to have, for the most part, an unsatisfying TV show versus if you put that plot point closer toward the front of the show or even in the middle of the show, you have room for the second half to explore the aftermath, to explore more, and there's less of a chance that the audience already sees where you're leading to, if that makes sense. So I think, in Jacob's case, if everyone knows, or at least the people that know that that's magic, that she's magic. They should just do that point up front, and then they'd have more room where everyone's on the same page, the audience is included, and there's more room to go, like where the audience won't know.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see like when they find creative ways to do it. Like I remember too, like in The Dark Knight, they don't call him Two Face, but they go like, "Oh, Harvey, your nickname at the DA's office is Harvey Two Face." And I remember like 10-year-old Jacob in the audience being like, no, his name is Two Face because he literally has two faces because he's half burnt with acid. Okay, like stop it. We all know what you're doing here. But anyway, that's just a me thing.
No, no, I don't think it's just a you thing. I think it's hard to find that line between the audience being in on something and keeping the audience in the dark.
Something I liked about Deadpool and Wolverine, I'll pay it a compliment since I know I'm a little more negative on it. I did really love the montage of the Wolverines kind of at the beginning. Like, obviously, like we kind of all knew going into it he was going to finally get the yellow suit, and that's awesome. But like, I was not expecting them to do a bunch of different comic book accurate Wolverines. Like, he also gets like the brown suit when he's fighting the Hulk, the whole Age of Apocalypse variant with like the wild hair. The fact that we got a more comic accurate old man Logan than in the movie Logan when he's on the porch, like with his cowboy hat and like the shaved sideburns, like that was all really surprising. The patch, right, with the white tuxedo and the eye patch, like I thought
Henry
was really
Cavill.
sorry.
Cavalrine.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah, cavalry. But yeah, I thought it was awesome that they like really referenced like the character's entire history in the comic books. Like they even had, the famous comic book shot of Wolverine crucified on the giant X. Like they really went all out with it, and I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who has only read so many comics, like I couldn't recognize most of those. Like I recognized Old Man Logan, but that was about it. I'm glad that comic fans had those Easter eggs, even though I couldn't recognize. Like I could tell that they were paying homage.
You may not be able to recognize it, but you can at the very least appreciate it
Yeah.
and respect it, which is what I've really loved with my journey through the MCU. Is that like if something's comic accurate or not, I don't really know, but I can always just respect it if it does pay homage to the comics.
Let's talk about the villains. So we got two villains in this movie. We had Cassandra Nova, who was present in the trailers, but we also got Paradox. So, what do you guys think of the villains, their motivations? Tell me your thoughts.
I liked Nova more than Paradox, but I didn't like either of them that much. I thought it was a little bit annoying when Deadpool or like when Wolverine got through to Cassandra Nova and let them escape. I was like, awesome. He got through to her. Professor Xavier's name has been respected. And then they go to stop Paradox, and Paradox is kind of like seen as the bigger bad. And then all of a sudden Nova's like, just kidding. You have something that I want, and now I'm going to destroy this now I'm going to use it, and I I don't fully remember what her purpose was for it. But I wasn't a big fan of the whole evil, not evil, back to being evil. I wasn't a fan of that. And Paradox as a whole, I was just like, this guy's kind of lame. In my opinion, the villains were the weakest part of the movie. And I've already told you guys I'm not a big fan of like having multiple villains per movie. I like the one big bad because that way you can put all your energy into stopping that one big bad as opposed to this part of the movie stop this one, this part of the movie stop this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is another huge problem with this movie for me. I don't think that you need a great villain to have a great superhero movie, but it definitely helps. And I think that this goes into like the kind of just bizarre storytelling choices that this movie makes is like Mr. Paradox is kind of the main villain of the movie because he's the one who kickstarts the plot. He wants to destroy Deadpool's universe. Deadpool wants to stop him. He punishes Deadpool by sending him to the void, etc. But like the issue is he's so divorced from everything else that happens in the movie. Like he's literally in a different universe. A lot of times, like with great villains, the heroes and the villains are reacting off of each other and they have some kind of personal connection. Like Deadpool and Mr. Paradox don't really have a connection in this movie. And he spends most of the movie just kind of like building his machine. Like there's large stretches of the movie where he's not there and he's not really like immediately affected by anything that Deadpool and Wolverine do in the void. So I think that was a big issue because like he's only really relevant like at the beginning and the end. And I think Cassandra Nova is in the movie to kind of fix that problem by having like a villain in the interim. But again, like she's also not very interesting. Like she's just sort of evil. Now, to be clear, I don't think any of the Deadpool movies have had great villains. Like Ajax in the first movie was basically just evil as well. And then two kind of had like Russell was sort of the villain, but Cable was sort of the villain. But again, I think that that's a weakness that can be overcome. But I think that neither of the villains in this movie, like you said, Javier, were like that compelling on their own. So I do think that that holds the movie back quite a bit.
So, jumping back to the meta, going along with this meta theory where Paradox is represented by Disney, Cassandra Nova represents the Marvel superfan. So Disney, aka Paradox, keeps the fans in line. They keep giving Cassandra Nova, the fans, new heroes to feed on, sending them to the void. And then the super fans feel betrayed by Disney trying to destroy what came before the MCU. So the fans try to destroy everything except for the old Fox movies and heroes that are safe in the void. So what do you think of that? You think that that meta lens is accurate?
I mean, maybe that's what they intended to do. I don't know. To be honest, I almost felt at times like this movie went so meta that it kind of forgot like whatever the layer under meta is, like the actual text, I guess, to the meta text. Because like there was a couple things that I noticed. Like number one, I thought it was kind of dumb where right before they meet the nice pool with the dog, like Wolverine and Deadpool are kind of journeying through the void. And like Wolverine says something mean to him, and Deadpool, like he's like, I'm telling Blake. The joke being that Ryan Reynolds is, married to Blake Lively. But it's like, I don't think Deadpool would say that, right? Because Deadpool has a girlfriend, or at least a woman that he was dating that he's in love with. Deadpool is an actual character. He's not just Ryan Reynolds in a red suit, right? And also, like, they make a comment at one point where he says, oh, yeah, Wolverine doesn't do shirtless scenes anymore after the divorce. Then, like, obviously at the end of the movie, Wolverine gets his shirt ripped off and he's huge jacked man, as they always say. But again, like, Wolverine didn't get a divorce. Like, I just feel like there's a fine line to walk where this movie veered so far into meta territory that it kind of, like, forgot that these are, like, actual characters with their own histories. Especially with the Blake Lively thing, I'm like, A, she's already in the movie with Ladypool. And B, he makes the joke at the beginning about Gossip Girl. So why does Deadpool then need to be like, I'm dating Blake Lively? No, you're not. You just broke up with Vanessa and you love her. That was the whole emotional core of the first movie. Why are you saying this?
He moved on fast.
Yeah, normally I'm totally on board with the plot needs to be strong. I don't know, I really enjoyed all the meta jokes, all of that, and I think it only works because it's Deadpool and it's Ryan Reynolds. I don't think that level of meta you'd be able to get away with it with any other character.
Imagine if Batman went meta all of a sudden.
What do you think, Javier? How are you feeling about the meta?
Uh, Kind of a mixed bag. Like, I understand where Jacob's coming from. That if you go too far into the meta, you start to lean away from the fact that this is a superhero movie at the end of the day. It's not Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman going on an adventure together. It's Deadpool and Wolverine. That doesn't mean that I didn't think it was funny. Like, I still like those meta jokes. I understand that it starts to veer away from the character, but like, as someone who isn't super invested into comic books as a medium, I didn't mind it that much. And I don't really think it took me out of the movie whenever those happened. So, I don't know. I thought I didn't mind it that much, but I get where Jacob's coming from.
It's definitely dangerous to go too deep into meta because, like Jacob said, you lose plot of like what it is.
Hmm.
I don't think they went too meta for this movie though. I mean, maybe if that meta like overarching plot line is accurate, pulling it back could have made the story a bit stronger, like the actual story, but all of those meta jokes, thinking back on that is one of the reasons why I bumped the score up versus what I thought about it when I first saw the movie.
Do you guys know some of the cameos in the Deadpool variants, like which actors were playing certain Deadpool variants?
I'm pretty sure Nathan Fillion was the zombie Headpool.
Yeah, that was Nathan Fillion.
Yeah. Well, you told me about one with the cowboy Deadpool.
Matthew McConaughey
Yeah, I didn't know.
was the cowboy Deadpool. Lady Pool, like you said before, is Blake Lively. The baby Pool is Ryan Reynolds' actual baby daughter, I think, or son.
And Kid Pool too was his kid.
Yeah, Kid Pool too, which wasn't expecting his kid to say those words. I don't know if I'd want my kid saying those words. I don't fully remember what they were. I just know it was graphic.
Javier, you mentioned you normally don't like two villains, and I can see why. I think it's very hard to pull off a movie with two villains. I think this movie did it though. One way to pull off the two villain movie is to have, let's say, the grand villain and the minor villain. So have the heroes go up against the minor villain, and then they need to take down the grand villain. I think that's one way to do it. I think that's natural. It's easy for the audiences to expect that. And then I think the other way to do it is to have a surprise villain, but have all of the seeds planted throughout the movie. Like, we knew Cassandra was an antagonist. Johnny Storm said all of those horrible things about her.
Yeah.
We didn't know. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't know she was going to end up causing a bigger problem for multiple universes. And the potential was there. It's not like we had any doubts about the strength of her powers. So I wasn't expecting that twist, and I liked it. Now, to Jacob's point, I think Jacob said it. It seems a little out of nowhere. Or did Javier say that? Her motivation, the evil, not evil, evil.
No, that was me.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little like just one or the other, man. Just one or the other.
Yeah. I think she's kind of crazy, though. She didn't grow up with a normal life, she only grew up in the void. So I think it's understandable for her to be a little flip floppy.
Oh, boo hoo! I didn't have actual parents.
Whoa.
I had a rough life.
Whoa.
Batman's parents are dead. You don't see him turning evil and then not evil.
Batman takes strong offense to that.
I don't think that her being just kind of like one dimensionally evil is a problem in and of itself. Like in theory, that's fine. It just depends on how these characters are incorporated into the story. I think that's another issue that I have with this movie is that it just suffers from the problem that a lot of superhero movies do of like the universe is at stake, or in this case, like the multiverse is at stake, which is always just like a very difficult motivation to relate to. Again, you look at the first Deadpool movie, it's kind of a simple movie. It's just like a revenge story. And it's like, Deadpool spends the movie like going after Ajax to try to get him to fix his appearance, ultimately realizing that he can't. Again, Ajax is also just kind of evil. He's just kind of a psycho in that movie. It's not a big deal though, because he's a bad person who does a bad thing to Deadpool and he wants revenge. Like, that's the setup to a lot of great movies, like John Wick, like I mentioned earlier. In this movie though, when you have two villains and they're both very one-dimensional, you have the stakes of like, oh, I'm trying to save my timeline from being erased, and these characters like exist outside of time and they, monitor the multiverse. Like, this becomes harder as an audience member to relate to that. And so I think Deadpool and Wolverine suffers from that problem of like the sequel always gets bigger and it loses some of that heart. Deadpool 2, I think it makes sense as like a middle movie in that like the stakes aren't as relatable as the first movie, but I think that they're still a little bit more relatable and understandable than in this movie. Because at least in Deadpool 2, you have the emotional through line of like he's depressed because his girlfriend dies, but he finds purpose in like saving the soul of this kid and like putting him on a better path, having him find redemption. Again, a little harder to relate to, but I think it's still more grounded than this movie of just saving the multiverse. So I think that kind of highlights the issue with the villains being sort of flat in some ways.
Yeah, there's definitely a hierarchy of villains when you're writing villains. There's the very basic, I'm evil just because. And then if you take it up to the next level, I'm evil because of this reason. And then if you take it up to the next level, I'm evil and the villain has a point, but it's still wrong. And then the top level, which is the villain's doing something bad, but the moral ethics are gray. So maybe the villain's not bad. Destroying the universe, destroying the world, destroying the multiverse, usually pretty low.
Mhm.
It's not a complicated villain. You know, that by itself I had an issue with, but Cassandra, I thought she was, like, slightly more complicated than just the "I wanna destroy it just because." I think even though it wasn't explained thoroughly enough in the movie, her goal is she knows the void. She likes reigning over everything. So if she realizes that she can get out of the void, and that there's more to life than the void, I think it makes sense that she wants to collapse everything so it's just so she's in control of everything that she knows and also everything in existence. But on a personal audience level, it is hard to relate to that multiverse being destroyed. It's a lot easier if they focused on the Deadpool's 9 family and friends versus the entire multiverse.
I just don't like her because she's bald.
I thought she pulled it off.
Bald people have had it good for far too long.
The ancient one too, I thought, pulled it off. Tilda.
Well, I think also, though, as far as the unsympathetic villain, like, it just goes back to the personal connection. Deadpool and Wolverine don't really have a relationship with either of our villains. I think that's part of why it feels weak. Because when you think about the great, like, hero and villain dynamics in comic books, for example, whether it's Professor X and Magneto, or Green Lantern and Sinestro, or Thor and Loki, it's like there's a strong personal connection there. And whether they're brothers or friends or whatever the case is, you understand that the hero and the villain react off of each other and they kind of represent two different sides of a coin. Part of why, like, the Dark Knight works so well is Joker is just pure evil in that movie. Like, he has no sympathetic, like, character background or nuance at all, but you see how he tests the heroes in that movie, not just Batman, but Commissioner Gordon and Harvey Dent. He brings them to their limit and he, causes the city to almost collapse. And obviously, Harvey Dent has a fall from grace because Joker kills Rachel. So even though he's pure evil, he's a great villain because he really does put the heroes through the ringer and he, like, almost wins, you know what I mean? And that's why you respect him as a character. I just don't feel like Cassandra Nova and Paradox are on that level in this movie.
Yeah. I was going to say this before. I think there is a lot of merit to a villain who doesn't have this elaborate backstory or elaborate why as to what they're doing. I've said this before. Some of my favorite villains in media, more specifically in anime, are villains that are just assholes. One of my favorite forms of literature is Dragon Ball Z, and there's a villain in it called Frieza. And Frieza is one of my favorite villains of all time. But he's not evil because of anything that happened like in his childhood or anything like that. No, he's just racist. But he's just so elaborately cruel and is such a force to be reckoned with that he is just such a great villain. Kind of in the same way that Joker is. Joker, like you said, he's just pure evil. He's an asshole. So yeah, I think it can be done if you're not just if you don't have this like elaborate backstory. But one of my problems with the villains is that, like, specifically with Cassandra Nova, she had kind of a backstory, but it was just kind of one note and bare bones. Because, like, if you're going to have a backstory, either go all out or just be pure evil. I don't like that wishy washy in between. And Paradox is just kind of a geek and lame. I don't like it.
Well, Frieza and Joker both have layers though. So, I guess you don't necessarily need to have a complicated reason, but they're completely formed characters. So, agreeing with your point that Cassandra and Paradox weren't completely formed, they probably could not stand on their own as a solo character or movie, at least at this stage that they're written.
Yeah, and it's disappointing too because, like, I do think with Mr. Paradox also there was the potential there for an interesting character because, like, he's middle management. He's kind of at this job where his job is to be dispassionate about timelines and his job is to just kill and erase universes because he kind of exists outside of time as a member of the TVA, and, like, his motivation is that, like, he wants to stand out, right? Like, he's kind of doing this thing that his bosses don't know about, but he wants to separate himself from the others and, kill Deadpool's timeline instantly because it's going to make him stand out at his job. And, like, there is something potentially interesting about that of a character who just observes time dispassionately because it's his job. But I just don't think the movie really, like, follows through and explores that a lot because are just stretches where he's not in the movie and you can almost forget that he's even there. And when he is there, he's just like on the phone with Pyro, just kind of being like, "Oh, they're still alive? Well, yeah, kill them because I'm still building my machine for the third act." And that's as far as it goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's another point I agree with. Like I feel like the writers forgot he was in the movie sometimes, so they were just like, "Oh right, let's give him a scene right here," and then it's like a 5 minute scene, and then like 20 or 30 minutes later, they're like, "Oh, we keep forgetting about this Paradox guy."
I think if they were able to figure out a way to give him more to do, more than just building a giant bomb, I think that would have helped the story, that would have helped him as a villain better.
Yeah, he ain't no Oppenheimer, I can tell you that.
And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Um, that's pretty much all my notes. Do you guys have any thoughts on anything else?
Regardless of the problems I had with the villains, which was probably the main sticking point I had, I just thought it was a fun movie. I would gladly watch it again. I want to go back and watch it in theaters again. It's before it's out of theaters. Compared to the rest of the MCU, when I think about this phase that it's currently in, can you guys just name some more movies that were in this phase? Because I honestly just lost track of the phases.
Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Marvels.
I think I've only seen this in Guardians 3. I did not make the effort to go see Ant Man, did not make the effort to go see the Marvels. Guardians 3 is a better movie, astronomically a better movie, in my opinion. Compared to the rest of the MCU, like not just this phase, I don't even really think it cracks my top 10, but I still think it was a fun movie. That's not a knock against the movie, it's more of a testament as to how great the first half of the MCU was.
I don't know if it would make my top 10 because there have been so many great MCU movies, but in terms of rewatchability, not just in terms of like how great it is, I think I could see myself rewatching this movie more often than other movies.
Yeah, like Avengers Endgame and Infinity War are better movies, but I'd probably choose to rewatch Deadpool and Wolverine over something like that.
Exactly.
I wouldn't. I would definitely take Infinity War. Don't look at me like that, Brendan. Again, I want to be clear too. Because I know I've been broadly negative in this review. Like,
Yes, Simon Cowell.
well, listen, I'm sorry. You simply have no talent. That was a terrible. I don't know. I was doing like a Sean Connery. I think. I don't know. Um,
I'll have the tits now for 300.
The British accent, that's what you're missing.
yeah, there you go. But yeah, to be clear, like I enjoyed most of the jokes in this movie. I enjoyed the action scenes. I loved all the the fan service, the Wolverine variants, him finally getting the yellow suit. Like that stuff all worked great for me. I just think that it had like some serious storytelling issues, and I felt like the nostalgia hits worked sometimes and didn't work others. Yeah, again, I don't think it's a bad movie by any means. I think it's fine. Like to me, a 6 out of 10 is like it's fine. It's like not quite like a really good movie, but it's not just mediocre. Like it's in the middle for me. I'll definitely rewatch it at some point because I do think it's a breezy watch. It's like only 2 hours long, so it's not like a huge commitment, and it has fun parts to it. I just think that I was generally disappointed or underwhelmed at certain things. Really, just a lot of like I think plot level decisions, and then just who they chose for some of the cameos were the things that I kind of was bumping up against. But definitely it's a lot better than recent MCU stuff, like because you got to throw the TV shows in there too. Like compared to something like Secret Invasion, like this is a masterpiece. So I would agree that this is one of the best MCU things that they put out post Endgame. But I think that that's more an indictment of how bad the MCU is now than like actual praise to Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, because when we think of everything past Endgame, you guys know Shang-Chi is my favorite MCU movie. So there's that. No Way Home.
Mhm.
I guess if you liked Loki, I hear people are mixed on Loki though, so I'm not sure if I can throw that in. I don't know if people like Moon Knight.
I liked it.
Brendan and I have fought about Moon Knight quite a bit.
I haven't seen it, so maybe I'll watch it and then I can be the middleman. Then there's this movie, and I know you're not the biggest fan of the Guardians, Jacob, but I love Guardians 3 is one of, did it come out this year or last year?
Last
Last
year.
year.
last year. It was one of my favorite movies of last year. And I know people are mixed on Guardians 2. People don't like Guardians 2 that much for some reason. I love all three of the movies. Guardians is easily my favorite ensemble movie in the MCU. Like, they're my favorite series. And I haven't seen any of the shows except for WandaVision. And even then, I wasn't that high on WandaVision like everybody else was. So, yeah, this phase is just everything past Endgame is just kind of. I'm trying to find that diamond in the rough.
Well, that's part of what this channel is about, trying to find some of the good in what Marvel has been doing or has done, even in the first couple of phases of the MCU.
You can't pay me to find the good in the Eternals. That's
Well,
the worst. That is the worst MCU movie, in my opinion.
we can definitely talk about that in another roundtable discussion. I'd be happy to have you both back as we break down other shows or talk about news even.
I'm not coming back if Craig's here.
Craig's recording for us. All right. Last thing before we go, ranking the 3 Deadpool movies.
All right, so I'm going based off my memory of like what I've said after seeing all movies, because I probably should have rewatched them leading up to this. My favorite one is probably Deadpool 2. I think Deadpool 2 is great. I thought it was funnier than Deadpool 1. Then I'd probably say Deadpool and Wolverine. It's fresh off the brain. I don't remember much from Deadpool 1. Not that, but like I said before, I kind of rate all of them the same a little bit because they all make me laugh pretty much the same amount. I don't fully remember the plots of any of them. Not even Deadpool and Wolverine, and that just happened like 2 weeks ago. And Deadpool 1 I probably rate last, but if I rewatch them, my ranking might change because for some reason there's like a group of people that say Deadpool 2 is not good, and I just don't remember it being bad at all. But yeah, that's probably where 2, 3, and 1.
I would have to say 1, 2, 3, with 1 being the best and 3 being the worst in my opinion. I think I said this before, but like to me, the first 2 Deadpool movies though are basically neck and neck. Like if the first movie is an 8 out of 10, the second one is like a 7.95. So I do really like both of them a lot. I think it's just a case of like for me, Deadpool 2 has bigger strengths, but also bigger weaknesses. I would definitely say, like I said earlier, Deadpool and Wolverine is to me like a 6. So definitely the worst of the 3 in my opinion, but by no means like a bad movie, just an okay one.
That's very interesting because I would have to say 1, 3, 2. I haven't seen the first and second movies in a while, but from what I remember, the first movie was tight. I'm not into rom-coms, but if a romance, storyline is done well, like I can appreciate that. And I felt like the first movie did that very well. I really liked the third or, Deadpool and Wolverine, whether that's Deadpool 3 or not, is left to be seen. And the second movie, I remember it being good. I just don't remember a lot of it sticking out other than like X-Force dying. I think that's the only thing I remember.
R.I.P. Vanisher.
On that note, I think we're done here. So thank you both for coming on, Jacob Walsh and Javier Fuentes. Yeah, thanks for being here and sharing your opinions.
Thank you for having me, man. I really enjoyed this, and I'd be happy to come back anytime to talk anything superhero related or just anything in general. If you want to talk quantum mechanics, I will be sure to Google that about 5 minutes before the chat.
I had a really good time tonight. This was fun. I always love talking about topics like this with you guys. We're all just nerds, and these types of discussions are the best.
Agreed. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation between the three of us on the recently released Deadpool and Wolverine. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And I love seeing your comments, so please comment below. If you agreed with something or if you didn't agree, I want to hear it. And Jennifer Garner, Electra fans, please comment below. I need to prove Jacob wrong. See you in the next video.